Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling a huge question, one that gets to the very core of belief. Is faith something that happens in your head or in your heart? We're going to explore this whole tension by looking at how some early Islamic teachings tried to spark a pretty radical shift, moving away from just blind belief to a faith built on reason.
So yeah, that question right there, that's really what this is all about today. Because according to the material we're looking at, how you answer that question, well, it changes pretty much everything.
You see, the argument is that the message of the Quran wasn't just another set of rules or another religion. It was a call for a total epistemological reset. That's a fancy term, but what it really means is hitting the reset button on how we even know what's true, moving away from stuff we just inherited, all the falsehoods, and building a new foundation on things we can actually verify.
And this big reset, well, it basically created two totally different paths to faith. You've got the path of the thinker, who's all about rational conviction, and then you have the path of the follower, who might rely more on emotion and just accepting things.
And you can see that difference laid out right here. The early believers, their approach was all about rational inquiry. They were encouraged to ponder, to question, to really analyze the message. The goal wasn't just to follow rules, it was to reach yaqeen, a state of absolute certainty built on reason. Now, compare that to what the source calls a more modern approach, which it argues often leans on blind belief and emotional attachment.
What's so interesting is that this wasn't some outside interpretation. The Quran itself was constantly poking and prodding people to use their minds, to think, to question. The idea was to light a fire under their intellectual curiosity, not stamp it out. The endgame? A faith that made sense in your head as much as it was felt in your heart.
So, what was the point of all this? It wasn't just to get people to follow along. The goal was to create a community of truth upholders, people who were so committed to the truth itself that they'd stand up for it, no matter what. Okay, so let's dig into a core command from those early scriptures, Takbir Rab. Now, this might seem simple, but as we're about to see, how you interpret this one little phrase has massive consequences. It all depends on whether you're coming at it with that thinker or follower mindset.
And wow, does this lay out the stakes. If you interpret magnify your Lord as just praise and worship, you might end up with a very personal, mystical kind of faith. If you see it as a call to use power to make God's law supreme, well, you could get emotionally charged groups who, as the source says, might even butcher people in God's name. But if you interpret it as a command to make truth, with a capital T, supreme in every part of life, that fosters an intellectual society. Where belief is enforced, it just grows naturally out of thinking and questioning.
And there's this really powerful analogy that gets to the heart of that third interpretation. Think about it. The goal isn't to force one little flower to grow in a bunch of mud. The real job is to clean up all the mud, to establish truth as the environment, so that countless flowers of genuine, reasoned faith can just grow all on their own. So this whole idea of establishing ultimate truth, that brings us to the second big concept we're talking about today, inzar, or the warning. And this isn't just about a threat. It's presented as the logical, inevitable consequence of that ultimate truth finally being revealed to everyone. The logic here is actually pretty straightforward, but it's also profound. The warning is about a final day of reckoning. But what happens on that day? A cosmic reset of information. Imagine a day where every piece of data is perfectly restored. Every lie, every falsehood is just gone. Wiped clean, and all that's left is the absolute unshakable truth. Every single action will be judged against that perfect information. Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, right? But what happens when your brain tells you one thing and, well, everyone around you wants you to say something else? The source material gives us this incredible, dramatic story that shows this exact conflict in action. So, meet Walid ibn al-Mughira. And this guy wasn't just anybody. He was a respected intellectual, a master of language and poetry. You know, the kind of person who was perfectly equipped to judge the message rationally, on its own merits. He didn't need to rely on blind faith. So he listens to it, and his expert mind just gets it. He comes to this crystal clear conclusion about its power and depth, and he says so, honestly, to his peers. He says, essentially, there's no way a human being wrote this. But, and here's where it gets complicated, his buddies, the other tribal chiefs, they weren't having it. They immediately saw his rational conclusion as a threat to their power, to their social standing. So he's suddenly faced with this massive choice: stick with the truth his own mind recognized, or protect his status in the tribe. And so, facing that pressure,
The fear of losing his position, his influence, he caved. He completely walked back what his own mind told him was true. He publicly dismissed the very thing he just praised, calling it nothing more than magic.
This act has a name, according to the source material: intellectual dishonesty. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's when you know something is true in your head, you've understood it rationally, but you deliberately deny it for your own personal, social, or political gain. This, right here, is presented as the ultimate roadblock to truth.
Waleed's story really hits home, because it's a timeless struggle, isn't it? The clash between what we know to be true and what the world pressures us to say. It really forces you to ask, when your personal truth is on a collision course with your social status, which one is going to win? Are we the thinkers, willing to stand for truth even when it costs us? Or are we the followers, choosing comfort over conviction? That's the question we're left with.